We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Whether the nation is ready for it or not, America's politicians are in full battle mode for what looks set to be a bruising set of November congressional elections. Every statement, every argument or cause célèbre raised has been weighed and measured for its vote-driving potential. We are well and truly in the not-so-golden age of 100% narrative. Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, here on the Radio American Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides, and on today's show, we're going all in on whether Joe Biden's 2023 budget is just a campaign ad to stave off near-certain midterm defeat. We have a special Signature Say What segment with longtime host of this here show, Tim Donner. We ask just how bad the numbers are for the Oscars and why they're falling so rapidly. And with the new partisan push to have Justice Clarence Thomas removed from the Supreme Court bench, we're talking Liberty with Scott Decascenta to ask why Democrats don't think this will be a quid pro quo moment for Justice Sonia Sotomayor. I want to take a moment to say a special thank you to our listeners out in Knoxville, Tennessee on WETR 760 AM and 92.3 FM. Thanks for being here. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNationRadio.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows that will whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. So without further ado, let's get started. President Biden has released his 2023 budget wish list. But beyond the media headlines eager to sell every Biden decision as a new deal for America, what are the details? And more importantly, how would these policies impact Americans? Well, to help us navigate the stormy waters of this narrative, we're joined by economist and author Andrew Moran. Welcome back to the show, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
So, Andrew, give me the broad strokes look at the figures involved here. What's he asking for?
Well, of course, the headline number is $5.8 trillion.
Now, what's the real number?
$5.8 trillion. That's the headline number. That's the key number that he's asking for, which is still one of the biggest in the United States history. What he asks for, I mean, it's pretty much, nothing really controversial about it. He wants money for Ukraine. He wants more money for global health security. He wants money for green energy projects, money to keep the government functioning. It's not so much what he's spending, though. I think the real thing about this budget is how he's going to confiscate more wealth from the American people. If you look at the tax rates, I mean, all the taxes are going up, or there's new tax proposals. The corporate tax rate goes up to 28%. The top individual tax bracket goes to 39.6%.
Let's dive into that.
Billionaire. Hold on. Sorry, one moment. Sorry. Also, he wants a billionaire's tax was 0.01% of the top earners.
Well, let's go through a few of those, actually. So,
Sure.
Corporate tax rate, 28%. Am
Yes.
I right in thinking that this will make business in America uncompetitive? And if they have the means and the opportunity and the motive, it sounds like a murderer, that businesses will leave for less tax-heavy climes. Is that pretty much the expected reaction?
Yeah, well, see, the problem with the corporate tax rate is that now in this environment, you have this global minimum tax of 15% that the OECD countries established. So it's very difficult for companies to try to find lower tax havens because of this 130-nation agreement that the U.S. joined also in December. So when you have a 20% corporate tax rate, I mean, where else are you going to go to? I mean, is it worth to completely shift operations, let's say, I don't know, Luxembourg for a 22% tax rate when you can be functioning in the world's largest economy? But at the same time, I mean, yeah, you do have, if you compare the corporate tax rates to capital outflows, you typically see that. I mean, they mirror each other when you have, capital fleeing the country, when you have higher corporate tax rate. At the same time, also, if you want to look at what President Trump did when he slashed corporate taxes, corporations really responded by benefiting their workers, which was, which a lot of people complain about that corporations don't do, but they did. They raised salaries, they offered all these different compensation packages, they reinvest in the workplaces. So higher corporate tax rates is not a good thing. I mean, you don't want to do that at all, especially in this environment when companies are trying to resuscitate from the pandemic.
All right. Now, one of the most bizarre elements for me is also in the tax arena, and it was on unrealized gains for the wealthy. Now, does this literally mean what I think it means, that people have to pay taxes on money that they haven't yet earned? Because if that's true, it seems ridiculous.
Yeah, it is absolutely ridiculous. But the problem, But the problem right now is that the unrealized capital gains tax only targets billionaires. So there's not going to be much pushback right now for this. What the real concern is, and I spoke to a market analyst about this just this past week after the budget was announced, is that he's worried that this is a gateway tax, that you're going to start with billionaires, and then it's going to be a slippery slope. Then you're going to target millionaires, and then you're going to target six-figure households, and then you're going to introduce all these different taxes that impact middle-class folks.
That was exactly my next question, Andrew. Is something like this likely to eventually spread to the middle classes? Because it seems that literally anything that starts out as just purely top level, it eventually gets foisted upon those who, quite honestly and with the best of intentions, thought, well, this is a tax on billionaires. This isn't going to affect me. And then a few years down the line, what's happened to my 401k?
Exactly. You saw this when the income tax was introduced, more than 100 years ago. It only targeted the top wealthy earners, and now everyone's paying an income tax. No matter even if you're in $20, you got to pay tax on all this nonsense. So yeah, I mean, it eventually is going to spread. Maybe not directly at first. Perhaps it's going to seep into the system, and thereby, you target billionaires, and then you're going to target brokerage firms, and then they're going to raise fees on their middle class traders. So it's going to have a more contagion effect as time goes by. Because yeah, Biden, maybe he wants target billionaires, but then the next administration, who's desperate for more revenues, say, fine, we can target people who are making $999 million, and then that gradually goes down to, let's say, 100 million, and then 50, and then we already know what people making 100 grand are being taxed on their on their stocks. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think this is something that people don't realize, that taxation has always been a slippery slope. Mm-hmm. It's, as you point out, it started with income tax that was supposed to be a temporary tax for the wealthy. And as the saying goes, there's nothing quite as permanent as a temporary government program.
Milton Friedman. That was Milton Friedman.
It was Milton Friedman, yeah. Of course, you're an economist. I thought it was Groucho Marx, but that's okay too. So let's talk realistically for a moment, though. We've got this spending, this 5.8. How much of what Biden is proposing, how much of it is going to stick if Democrats lose control of the House and or the Senate in November?
Yeah. All right. Okay. So I think most of it is going to stay, because here's a problem in Washington politics. So the Democrats are going to say they want 5.8 trillion, and then the Republicans are going to say, you know what, we need to cut this, we need to have more in line with these revenues, yada yada yada. And they're going to say, you know what, we want 4.9 trillion, and then they're going to meet the middle, and it's going to be a $5.3 trillion budget, and there's going to be more deficits, more debt, and just more increasing the size and scope of government. That's what these budgets always do. There's no being fiscally responsible, although Biden says that his budget is fiscally responsible, which is complete asinine if you look at all the numbers. But overall, I mean, it is, most of it's going to stick by the time the midterm elections come. I mean, don't fool yourself. That's not going to happen.
Now, I'm hearing that this will cut back on the national debt. Now, is that just DC spin? Am I right in thinking that how this long con works is that the programs that are in place, if they're not sunsetted, they actually add to a ballooning debt and deficit? Is that how it all works?
Well, even if the programs are sunsetted, there's still going to be, I think, a total of $14.4 trillion of deficits over the next 10 years, according to Biden's personal budget, 2023 budget. And it's funny, if you listen to that that conference call that Cecilia Rose had and Shalanda Young, and they were telling reporters, one of the reporters asked, "Oh, how can Biden take credit for reducing the deficit when a lot of the pandemic era programs expired?" And Cecilia Rose said, "I have 3 letters for you. ARP." So I'm not suggesting that Biden spending more of the American Rescue Plan is going to somehow trim the deficit was complete nonsense. And this idea that trimming $1 trillion deficit over 10 years is going to amount to anything, it befuddles the mind. Because as I said, $14.4 trillion worth of deficits are going to be accumulated over the next 10 years. That doesn't account if a Republican president or another Democratic administration continues spending even more. And then that all adds to national debt. That takes up a greater chunk. And then when interest rates rise, that's going to be more of a net interest on the debt to service his debt. Right now, the administration is benefiting because the real interest rate's negative, so therefore the net interest payments are about negative $27 million. But according to his budget, which, if I might add, are quite subdued when it comes to interest rate outlook. He says they're going to pay about $1.3 trillion in debt servicing costs over the next 10 years, which would probably be more like $3 trillion if you take into account higher interest rates. So everything he's saying about the federal deficit is frustrating because it defies reality. It defies how the swamp works, and it doesn't. And the numbers are all subdued, which they admitted too. They're saying, "Oh, our numbers were locked in before the invasion, so that's why our inflation numbers are as low as they are." Blah blah blah.
All right, now let's cut to the chase, Miss Andrew.
Yes.
I'm thinking that this entire budget is an advertisement for the Democratic Party in the hopes of winning votes in 2022 November. What do you make of it?
I don't necessarily think so. I think the big thing for Biden and winning Democrats or Democrat votes in 2022 and perhaps 2024 would have been the Build Back Better agenda. I mean, that had more of the meat and potatoes of what Democrats want, especially when it comes to green energy infrastructure. This thing essentially just adapts to current situation in our post-pandemic environment, and then keeps the lights of Congress open. So it's the bare bones of the U.S. government. It's the Build Back Better and all these other pet projects of the administration that would appeal more to the Democratic base come 2022. Because if you look at this budget, it doesn't include, let's say, the child tax credit payments, which is what a lot of Democratic voters want, or Americans in general would like, free money to having kids. And that doesn't include that. If there was a budget that included that, which who knows, maybe Democrats will insert that when they have the budget talks or budget negotiations, then we'll have that, then perhaps that will appeal to the Democratic base. But overall, I don't think this budget alone is going to influence anybody to vote for the Democrats.
Okay, and final question for you, Andrew. Are we expecting a mighty Festivus report from Senator Rand Paul this coming year?
Yeah, exactly. I've been thinking that a lot too, especially when it comes to the whole Ukraine, because this budget includes, I think, an extra $5 billion for Ukraine on top of all the other tens of billions of dollars given to Ukraine. I guarantee you that Festivus report's going to find something like, $300,000 went to some gender equality program in southeastern Ukraine, something of that nature. So yeah, there's going to be a big Festivus report coming this Festivus for the rest of us in December.
Andrew Moran, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up later in the show, we're talking Liberty with Scott DeCasenta to figure out whether Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and the squad can really force Justice Clarence Thomas off the Supreme Court bench. But up next, after this short break, we examine why the Oscars has gone from cultural icon to woke nonsense in such a short time, and why the viewing public is voting with their feet. Don't touch that dial. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.